When we first start blocking out our town hall interior, first we're going to take stock of the overall footprint of the block out we did earlier and figure out how much floor space we have here by laying out a grid of these 4x4 floor proxy meshes. I'm just going to trace them kind of over the rough block out shape that we placed before. So it looks like when we have our whole grid set up here, we have, it looks like about 20 by 15. And we're also going to extend the floor a little bit here, extrude a little bit to make our entrance area or lobby into the town hall. So we don't enter directly into a giant kind of warehouse-like building. We're going to have kind of an entry hall here that we're going to build. So we're just going to use the sort of the double width doorway because it's kind of the grand open entrance into the town hall. And we'll just kind of all drag our proxy meshes around the foundation much as we did before. Here I'm scaling up a window mesh to sort of approximate really tall windows that would let a lot of light into a civic space, including a town hall building like we have here. Using our corner mesh there on the corner of the foundation. Probably have to play a little bit with the height of these windows because I do want the player to have to eventually jump through one of them to enter the building. The front door will be blocked. Do a little realignment on the steeple. Some town halls have auditorium-like spaces inside them where people gather, so I'm trying to create these dividing walls with multiple entrances that you'd find leading into an auditorium-like space here, hall. So that's kind of what I'm doing there. I'm having kind of a main doorway in the middle, which will close off, and we'll have kind of two smaller doors that go in on either side. So you can see that I raised up a ceiling mesh there. We're not adding a second floor to the town hall. We're just sort of indicating that the ceiling is lower in this sort of entrance area. And here I'll continue building the exterior bounds of the structure with more proxy wall meshes. So I want to close off the front door to the town hall and also the center door to the auditorium. It's not openable, it's sort of permanently shut. I'm just adding a white door there just so it's kind of visible against the darker gray. And playing a little bit with the roof heights here to sort of align with the various wall heights that we have. And here I'm just going to duplicate these wall meshes a bit. Some of these I'm going to turn into tall windows by just scaling up the 2x4 window proxy mesh. Here I'm messing around a little bit to try to kind of align these things. This might require more custom geo, but for now I feel like it's fine. They work fine as tall windows that would let a lot of light into an interior auditorium space. I think it's pretty obvious, at least from what we built. And here I'm just adding in some filler wall meshes around the borders of the building, realigning some things that weren't quite aligned with the grid so we can keep building this cleanly. There we go, that's all aligned. And almost, there we go. There we go. I like keeping my grid snaps to 25 a lot when I'm building these things, mainly because the wall thickness is 25, and a lot of times you have to like build around a wall thickness as you're doing this. Next, I'm going to duplicate all the proxy meshes that are used to make up one side of the town hall building over to the other side because this is as like a simple civic town hall building. It's just very symmetrical, very boxy, nothing too fancy really. But we want it to be a space that's maybe big enough for a small 1v1 or maybe 1v2 combat. It's one of those things like probably through iteration in the blockout phase, we'd find out how large this space needs to be to have good combat experience inside of it. Combat can take place in the exterior as well. It's just more important first we figure out a good representative size for a town hall like this, and then we can figure out how we can adjust it to meet the needs of combat, either inside and also outside the footprint we have in the blockout. So here I'm using shape meshes for the roof, much as I did on the mill. I use the prism meshes for the sort of triangular facades of the front and back of the roof structure. And I'm just sort of scaling up a shaped cube mesh for the actual roof planes. Once that's aligned, we should be able to move all this stuff into place. And there we go. That slides into place on one half of the roof. We'll just duplicate it and pivot it to make the other half of our roof plane. We'll take a look at the inside of the roof here, and I'm going to pull these bits of geometry forward a little bit to make it clear there's not an interior part of the roof to be reached. Now that our town hall is built with architecturally standardized proxy meshes, we're going to look at placing cover objects inside the combat space we have planned for the interior. Now, we know what the character's crouch height is, so we want to make sure that all of our cover objects placed here are all scaled to that crouch height. I'm going to go in here and add a primitive shaped cube to the interior. This will serve as like a basis for our cover objects if we're planning out kind of gun combat inside here. So I'm going to change the material to the developer material. We're using yellow to indicate cover. So whenever anybody sees this in the game during the blockout phase, during early playtesting, they'll know that like this object here is to be used as cover. They can expect that it's been scaled to the proper height for cover. So right now, as I add it in, it's just a block, but I'll figure out what this block can be later for cover as far as an actual prop. These cover objects could be furniture, perhaps small benches that you might find in a public meeting hall like this. So I'll do a little bit of manipulation just to convey the fact that they are in fact furniture, and I'll just kind of duplicate them throughout the space as cover. Again, because this is a civic space, I'm going to arrange the furniture pretty symmetrically throughout, at least to start, before we see how it might work best as cover. But later I might mess up this layout a little bit. If this is an abandoned town hall that was later moved into by bandits, then it would give me the narrative justification to mess things up a bit, to say vandals or bandits did it. I could also like even play with the arrangement of objects to be more interesting for a cover-based shooter, that kind of thing. Although right now, like as I look through this, my initial impression based on the space we have available here is it probably needs less cover or the interior needs to be bigger. So that's something that like if we did have shooting mechanics, we could play through, do some iterating based on our experience with the combat, and hopefully get it done in this blockout phase, which makes your layout more flexible and better for gameplay, again, if you're doing these kinds of adjustments during the blockout phase. At one end of the auditorium here, I've added a stage where a speaker would address the assembled townsfolk when the hall was still functioning. And I've added some stairs there. I'm going to play around a little bit with more furniture placement on top of the stage. And I'm trying to work out a good floor plan here that incorporates the right kind of cover density, but it also incorporates stairs that lead up to the stage in a way that makes sense for how the hall was originally built, but will also work well for player pathing through the space and combat gameplay. On the rear exit out of the town hall, because remember, they're supposed to come in the front of the building and exit out the back of the building, and eventually go toward the hazardous return path to the mill. So I'm building kind of a back staircase here. It's feeling a little tight, like it's definitely big enough to be traversed by the player based on the metrics we've established for the player character. Later on, I might find I have to expand this out more. Maybe make the whole town hall from front to back a little deeper so we allow for more space. Just to allow a little bit more space to maneuver. We might even want to make that space on the stage bigger for enemies to maneuver around in. So again, I'm going to indicate some more of those tall windows from the sides of the buildings, also in the back of the building. These tall windows in the back might even serve as kind of a clue that there's another path out the back of the building. There could be some light visible through the window, so the player knows they have to kind of fight their way through. But conceivably, up on top of the stage, they'd probably find the key to the bridge. At least that's my initial plan. This is a very loose kind of level design plan for as far as level objectives go. But right now, that's kind of the general idea I'm working from. I'm adding, again, just for plausibility reasons, I'm adding like a small out-hanging roof on the sort of extruded exit stair area back there. So once I finished making this little roof here on the back of the building, I'm going to play a little bit with refining the position of this whole thing in the world. So now I'm going to select all the meshes that make up the town hall using the layer group. And then I'm going to reposition them while keeping an eye on how they look from the different POV cams. At this point, I've also grouped all the meshes for the town hall by Control-G. Now I'm going to block off the front of the town hall, make it so these are permanently locked or barricaded doors, but make it seem like that was an entrance originally. Also, I don't want the people to think they can jump in through all the windows, so I'm going to add in the indication here through a dark material color that these are boarded up or closed windows. They can't be entered through. And I'm doing this mainly as preparation for a bit of contrast, where the players will find one window that's broken and has some convenient objects placed in front of it. Maybe it's supplies brought there by the bandits. Maybe it's things people looted a long time ago. We don't really know. But anyway, yeah, here's just some placeholder objects I'm going to add to the world. I'm keeping an eye on my POV camera so I can see there's an opening in the window that I've made to jump through. I'm making this arrangement of objects look kind of obvious. The player can get up there from below. And I'm making these little cubes visible from a distance. You can see them in the POV camera. And I'm adding a green color on them to show that's sort of the critical path forward. That's just the sort of level design indicator. That's not something that would remain in the finished game, although maybe a high key color could be put there to indicate that's the way forward. I'm also adding some fencing here around the outsides of the town hall, so it's more clear to the player that they can't go around the outside of the building. They have to go through it. So here I'm going to just do a quick play test. Again, we can see the green crates in the distance. It kind of cues us forward. There could even be a combat where the player has to push through to reach this window. There's enough room for a small combat there. So here we jump in through the window. I see that I left this open. I don't really like that I can immediately see combat. I'm probably going to block that off. But if I go on this side, I kind of like how maybe we can tease the combat space. Maybe we can see through there but not enter on the right-hand door. That could be kind of interesting. But then we move to the left-hand door to begin combat and take cover at some of the cover objects right near us. So we go through this space. We have a brief combat, a brief shootout. Probably 2 enemies max. It's not very big. That's what it looks like if I zoom in with my so-called, shooting camera. It feels okay for a small combat. Maybe it's just a boss combat against one character. But it seems small. It doesn't seem too big. For a small scale combat, I feel like it's pretty good. We have a clear path to the back of the level, and we have our path to our hazardous return. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of refinement here. I'm going to block this off like I mentioned before. A little bit of scaling on this mesh. Make this like a partially destroyed door so I can look through holes in it. I'm going to have this door be broken in just a way that it reveals a little bit of the room beyond, but it's not encouraging them to start a gunfight through that space. Also in the back here, I'm going to close off one of these windows. And I'm going to leave the window to the right broken and showing a little bit of light through to sort of hint to the player that the exit out of the town hall is actually in the back of the town hall. And we don't see the actual door from here, but hopefully the rays of light shining through this broken window help convey that to the player.